Pastor Andy Stanley is a pastor in Atlanta, Georgia, and he tells a story about the Dust Bowl in the early 1930s, and in particular, he tells a story about a guy named Jeremiah Clary. Now, I don't know if Jeremiah Clary is a real person or not. Maybe he made this story up, but he tells this story about a guy named Jeremiah Clary who is a farmer in the panhandle of Oklahoma in the early 1930s, but beginning to live through the Dust Bowl, where in the American Midwest there was over farming as people moved to that part of the country and the farming was pretty good for a few years, people living there, but after a while, the rain stopped coming, and then real chaos began to ensue. Because there was no rain, there was therefore no crop. Because there was no crop, there was no ability to hold the soil in place, and so for years, the prairie winds would whip across the Midwestern United States, and it would create what you see in the slides behind me, these like mountains of dust that would fill the landscape of the American Midwest. And it led to tremendous disaster and tremendous financial ruin for a lot of people who had just barely made it through the American Great Depression or were in the middle of doing it. And so in Andy Stanley's account of Jeremiah Clary, he talks about how the Dust Bowl has been going on for about 5 years. Clary and most of the other farmers near him have no money because they've had no crops for at least 5 years. There's lots of wind and there's little seed left because every year in the spring they would plant seed, and then because all the good soil had been swept away from Oklahoma into Missouri and Arkansas, he would plant, and then the winds would come and no rain would come and his seed would be gone. And so he's literally having this inner dialogue with himself of, do I plant and risk losing my remaining seed to what could be, or do I hold on to it and have no shot at harvest? I mean, this guy is like down to his last year worth of seed from the good years, and he's having this conversation with himself asking, okay, I've got enough for one more harvest. Do I plant it or do I not? If I hang on to it, it's not going to get blown away in the prairie winds, but it's also not going to reap a crop. And we're 5 years into having no crops. And you can, in Stanley's story, you can feel the tension that this guy is wrestling through of, if I plant this and the winds come, I lose everything. If I don't plant it and the winds don't come and the rains come, I gain nothing. And I can feel, like, I don't know about you, but I can feel a bit of that tension. It feels a little bit right now like we're living in like a metaphorical dust bowl financially as a culture. I love watching on television. Like, I remember ninth grade economics with Coach Renault. He was my baseball coach, and he was the worst economics teacher of all time. I don't remember a whole lot about that class because he literally we would walk in and he would go, okay, open your books to page 65 and go to page 74. And like all he was sitting there doing was like, coaching up stuff for the baseball game that our baseball team was going to play later in the day. But I do remember there being a very firm definition of what a recession was and what bull and bear markets was. Like, those were just defined sort of, this is what it is. And I'm amused right now when I turn on my television and people are like, are we in recession? Are we not? Like, we are in a recession. Like, by the ninth grade metric that my baseball coach / econ teacher taught us, we are living in the middle of recession. Anybody who tells you that we're not, like, don't believe them. By all economic metrics, we are living in recession. There are supply chain issues. I don't know how many of you in the last few months have gone to buy something and they've gone, oh, it's not here, or it won't be available for a few weeks or even months. Has anybody dealt with that? Yep, a couple of you. I'm sorry. I feel your pain. We're dealing with an increased cost of living. We're dealing with a volatile stock market. We're dealing with rising inflations, but wages that can't keep up. Like, a 25-cent raise is amazing, except my milk has gone up by more than that. My eggs have gone up by more than that. The gas has gone up by more than that, and it can't keep up at the moment. And then even this week, I hate to continue to give you bad news, but sometimes I'll give you the bad news before we get to the good news. This week, I read on national platforms them talking about how in New England our heating could be as high as 60% more because it's supposed to be a 3% colder winter. Thanks a lot, global warming. Where were you on that? Like climate change, yes, like I would take some global warming with the climate change. And because of rising costs, it can feel a bit like Jeremiah Clary right now. Do I plant my seed? Do I not? Am I living in the middle of an economic dust bowl? It can be scary. It can be scary. Like, even among our staff, we've had conversations. Like, we all went and got space heaters because we were like, we're not heating this whole church building for 4 tiny offices. We're going to figure this out and be creative even this summer because we're living in the middle of an economic dust bowl. And it can be really uncertain, even for Christians, even for people who follow Jesus and believe that Jesus is not just Savior, but also Lord. It can be really uncertain unless we sort of settle down and sit down in the truth of the gospel. And so today, I want to encourage us, Christians, I'll circle back to what I said earlier. If you are a follower of Christ today, if you have invited Christ into your life, you have a relationship with God because of the death and resurrection of Jesus, like this is for you. If you're here today and you go, I'm not sure, I'm a doubter, I'm thinking about it, but I'm not there yet. Today is, the specific application is not for you, okay? Like, I want to be really clear and generous when we get to talking about the law of the harvest. Let me read to you Galatians 6. We're going to start in verse 6. I'm going to do even one more verse that Howard didn't read and take us down to verse 10 in our series through Galatians. Now, let the one who has taught the word share all good things with the one who teaches. Let me tell you, Paul is writing this letter. If you haven't been here for the past few weeks, Paul is writing this letter to a network of basically like house churches meeting in a region of what is today modern-day Turkey. And none of these people across several cities in modern-day Turkey in a region called Galatia, and none of these people are rich. Let me just get that right out of the way really quick. What he's about to say, he is not writing to independently wealthy trust fund babies who get to just run around and, spend mom and dad's cash on the church and all this other stuff. He is not even writing to comfortable people. By all economic measures, the earliest Christians were, on the whole, pretty poor people. Most of them were poor, just so we're really clear. Galatians is one of the first books of the New Testament that's written because most of them started in the city of Jerusalem until a persecution broke out and they were all forced to scatter to different parts of the Roman Empire, to places like the region of Galatia. And so the sort of OG founders of these churches in Galatia are usually like refugees who came from Jerusalem upon threat of their life. So the people who have been Christians the longest are not rich because they've had to establish an entirely new economic base in new cities. This is not to rich people. I just want to get that out really clear. So verse 6, let the one who has taught the word share all good things with the one who teaches. And don't be deceived. God's not mocked. For whatever one sows, that also will he reap. For the one who sows to his own flesh will from the flesh reap corruption, but the one who sows to the Spirit will from the Spirit reap eternal life. And let us not grow weary of doing good, for in due season we will reap if we don't give up. So then, as we have opportunity, let us do good to everyone, and especially to those who are of the household of faith. There's a parallel passage to this, by the way, in 2 Corinthians 9, if you want to go and read it. When Paul tends to talk in this terminology in the New Testament, there's multiple layers to this. On the one layer, there's what we call the law of the harvest. Like, what I put in the ground, I will reap a crop on. If I put any type of morality or immorality or amorality, belief or unbelief, if I put that in the ground and I water it and give it light and tend it, I will reap a crop on it. In this particular instance, though, what he is actually talking about is giving and generosity. And that's where we're going to focus today. We may go over here next week, but I want to hone in today because he's specifically talking about Christians and giving and living generously and sowing generously. Now, let me give you really quickly 3 reminders from the series and from things we talk about a lot at Christ Church. Number 1, we've said this almost every Sunday. All the benefits of the gospel come to us by grace alone, through faith alone, in Christ alone. Some of you who are Christians grew up in religious traditions where the person standing here reading the Bible would say, you have to believe, but you also have to give money. And if you don't give money, then you will not be blessed and loved and graced. And the overwhelming theme of Galatians, the reason Paul wrote it, is to say it is grace alone, through faith alone, and Christ alone. You cannot add good works to it. You cannot add church attendance to it. You cannot add good deeds to it. You can't add money to it. It's none of that. The benefits of the gospel come to us by grace alone, through faith alone, and Christ alone. Second reminder that we've talked about in this series was last week in chapter 5, verse 25 down through 6:5. Paul said that the church is to bear one another's burdens, and the word for that burdens, that Greek word, is like a boulder. Paul says the church is to shoulder the impossible to carry boulder collectively. There are burdens that some of us are living through that are too big for anybody to carry alone. That's why as a church we say your faith is to be personal but not private, because we're to carry one another's impossible burdens. But in 6:5, Paul also said, each of you is to carry your own load. So we're to collectively share our burdens, the boulders, and every one of us, Paul says, is to carry our backpack, is the word there, our load that we can carry. Bear one another's burdens, carry your own load. And then the third thing that we talk about a lot here is that God loves you. Christians, hear this, and not yet follower of Jesus, hear this. God loves you just where you are, but He loves you too much to leave you there. God loves you just where you are today in your belief or lack thereof. He loves you too much to leave you there. God loves you just where you are today in the midst of your addiction, but He loves you too much to leave you there. God loves you just where you are today in your messed up relationship, whichever one it may be, but He loves you too much to leave you there. God loves you just where you are, new baby Christian, but He loves you way too much to leave you there. We say that all the time, and I hope that becomes one of those things that we just say as a church, like breathing over time, and it needs to be sort of the groundwork of what we're talking about today. So with those three truths in mind, let's begin to move through this passage. Let the one who's taught the word, verse 6, share all good things with the one who's teaching. What Paul is saying here is that it's okay for churches to have paid pastors and staffs. It's okay that at our church we have 4 people who are on staff here. That's okay. He says those people teach and do the work of ministry. This week, Kayla organized the Halloween Polaroid photo booth, and several of you came and helped. I think about 6 or 8 of you came and helped at different points of the night. And we were able to take 300 Polaroid photos of people in our neighborhood. That literally was over 1,000 people that we were able to serve. And we handed them a postcard that said, church doesn't have to be scary, and it's really cute branding. And I had this woman who is an atheist, and I know it because she's told me that several times, come up, and she says, I got to be honest, your church's branding is really on point. And I was like, I know, it is pretty good. It's all Kayla. I was like, Kayla's organizing this whole thing. She's a rock star. It's amazing. That work of ministry and serving our community doesn't happen if she's not in that role. Nick does an amazing job. Nick gets up here, man. When Nick and Nikki got here 2 years ago, there was no other musicians that we knew of, and God has been using Nick's gifts to pull gifts out of others. It's incredible. And then, if you see painted walls in here, or you see that the lift chair works now, or you see all this other stuff, a lot of it's because he works on this building so often. That's incredible ministry that I can't even begin to think about doing. I mean, Stephen works on our staff, and he is what we call the executive director. He's consulting us on how to watch the church grow and make sure that our groups are healthy, and when people come to the first time, they feel seen and heard and acknowledged and loved and welcomed. And helping to make sure that every man, woman, boy, and girl has at least one chance in Charlestown to say yes or no to Jesus, and that the church is prepared to make the steps as that happens. I mean, every week I get to pray for you, I get to preach the word of God to you, and I get to lead you and be your pastor. And those are all noble callings. And Paul says, it's okay. Let the one who teaches the word, who does the ministry, feel okay about receiving compensation for that. That's what he's saying. It's okay. Preachers shouldn't be rich. I can tell you, I've seen the budget of our church. Nobody on staff here is getting rich. The stewardship team could come up here and give you a testimony that nobody on staff here is getting rich. When Paul says, let the church share, In that, what he's saying is the word fellowship. See, fellowship is more than sitting around round tables and eating meals together. Part of fellowship is, Paul would say, is giving and making sure that the work of ministry gets done. In this passage, that's what he's saying. The fellowship is Christians sharing in their resources and beginning to give generously. Verse 7, don't be deceived. It says, don't let the wool be pulled over your eyes. Don't let somebody pull the wool over your eyes. Don't do that to yourself. Don't be deceived. And then he uses this really strong phrase, God is not mocked. That phrase is, it literally in Greek means like God is not to be held in contempt. In other words, it's like to go, in other words, it's like going like this. He says, you can't do this to God. That's literally what it means. In the most literal word, Paul goes, you can't do this to God. God will not be mocked. God will not be humphed by us. That's what he's saying. God, don't be deceived. Don't be fooled. Don't fool yourself. God is not mocked. You can't hold God in contempt. You can't turn your nose up at God. He says, for whatever one sows, that will he reap. Now, if you're a Bible underliner, and you know I'm encouraging you to do that, underline the word whatever, because all of us are sowing some things. Whatever you put in the dirt, you will guaranteed reap. We may talk about this a little bit more next week, more broadly, the law of the harvest, but for today, let me encourage you, Christian, that if you sow a life of generosity, you will reap a harvest of generosity. If you sow a life of greed, you will reap a life of greed. If you sow a life of financial irresponsibility, you will reap the consequence of that. We have dear friends, you've heard me talk about them before. They were part of our church plant in Greenville. They sowed financial irresponsibility to the point of about 4 years into their marriage, they looked up and had $225,000 worth of debt. And you know what? The Lord convicted them. They began to take passages like this seriously, and within 18 months, they paid the entire debt off because they began to sow financial stewardship. And I asked them, I said, what are you going to do now that you've paid that debt off? And they said, well, we're not eating peanut butter and jelly sandwiches tonight. And in an effort to reap some financial freedom, they sowed peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and spaghetti noodles for 18 months until they paid it off. If you sow generosity and good stewardship, you will reap a harvest. Don't be deceived. God will not be mocked. You cannot plant an apple seed and get a peach tree. You cannot plant corn and get potatoes. It just does not work. My granddad always kept a garden, and my mom asked him one time, she said, Dad, we have plenty of money. Why are you growing a garden? We don't need these vegetables. And this was before we realized that all of our food had additives and all these preservatives. He said, because I want my grandsons to learn that what you put in the dirt, you can grow out of the dirt. There was a spiritual principle there he wanted us to learn. Whatever one sows, that will guaranteed he or she also reap. For the one who sows to his own flesh, from the flesh will reap corruption, but the one who sows to the Spirit will from the Spirit reap eternal life. Here's the thing. You'll never reap a harvest from a seed you never sow. It's the big idea today. I want you to hear that. You and I will never reap a harvest from a seed we didn't plant. That was the great risk in that Jeremiah Clary story. God, do I plant this knowing I may lose everything? And what he ended up coming to the conclusion on is if he didn't plant it, he wasn't going to live, because you can't reap a harvest from a seed that you don't end up sowing at all. It just doesn't work that way. We never reap a harvest from a seed we didn't sow. You will never make a single cake without wasting some eggs and flour and other ingredients. You will never make the game-winning shot without shooting the ball, and you will never reap a spiritual, eternal harvest without sowing some spiritual seeds, including specifically in this passage, money. It just doesn't work. So there are three outcomes, though, that happen when we give, and I want to show them to you in this passage. The first one is what it does for God. We see in verse 7, don't be deceived, God's not mocked. Whatever he sows, that will he reap. So if God is not mocked, what this does for God is, what's the opposite of mocking God? It's honoring God. When you give, you are honoring God. You're not paying church bills. You're not heating the room. Yesterday we were here at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. It was warm, and I told Nick, I was like, thank God it's 75 degrees in Boston. Like, part of me is over it, and I'm ready to listen to Christmas music on November the 6th, and I'm here for the sun setting at 4:30. Bring it on. I'm ready for it. It means Christmas is coming, and I'm good. Another part of me is like, I'm glad we're not paying the heating bills. Leave it warm as long as you can. Like, it's going to be okay. Like, I don't even know why I told you that story now that I'm in the middle of it. Like, let me just get off of that rabbit trail and get right back. God is honored when we choose to give. He's not mocked. It's a big deal to him. God blesses our honoring him. Hope, will you skip the next one and go to the next one after that? Will you go to the Malachi one? Let me read you a verse I had to memorize when I was in the 6th grade. When you're in the 6th grade and you want to be playing baseball and your mom makes you memorize a bunch of verses, like I was good with Jesus wept and I was good with pray continually. This one was a bear. And my mom had me memorize this. Bring the full tithe into the storehouse, that there may be food in my house. And thereby put me to the test, says the Lord of hosts, the Lord of armies. Only time in the Bible God says put him to the test. I'll say that again. It is the only time in the entire Bible that God says test me. Says the Lord of hosts, see if I will not open the windows of heaven for you and pour down for you a blessing until there is no more need. Just bring it. God says, just bring it. I am honored by your giving. I am honored by your sowing. I am honored by it, and I will bless it. When we give, when you give, God is honored. When we as a church collectively give, God is honored. The second thing that happens, Hope, if you'll go to that next one, what happens to you and me? Verse 8 tells us what happens to us. For the one who sows to his flesh will reap corruption, but the one who sows to the Spirit will reap eternal life. When we choose to give, we reap a harvest, and we will reap. We have dear friends. I'm glad that he hasn't fallen asleep here. He's still awake. These are our friends Mike and Missy. Will you guys wave? Mike and Missy totally surprised me this morning. They were part of our very first church plant down in Greenville, South Carolina. They were part of the very first core team for the very first church that we ever planted. Missy's sister Hope overheard me talking one day in a coffee shop about being part of starting a church, and her sister said, hey, would you mind if we became part of that? And they showed up one Tuesday night at somebody's house, randomly strangers, and Hope brought Missy, in case it was a cult, they needed 2 people to get out. And so Mike and Missy were part of our first church plant from the very beginning. And we were just talking this morning about this young woman, Emily, who 13 years ago, probably, I believe, gave her life to Jesus. And just nothing ever happened with it. And Missy, this morning, when we were talking, goes, hey, I got to tell you about Emily. Emily's been walking with the Lord, really, for like 9 months now. And I was like, man, isn't that like the Lord? I was like, sometimes it just takes a long time. We planted seed in the dirt of sharing the gospel with Emily 13 years ago, and it's taken until now for the harvest to come. But when we sow, God promises that we will reap. We get to determine what we're going to reap. We will reap. You will reap, brothers and sisters, what you sow. You just get to determine what it is you want to reap. I get to determine that. For my life, you get to determine that. And we get to determine that as a church as well, by the way. Let me just say that for 6 years, we've existed because some other churches and some other individuals in other parts of the city and other parts of the United States have chosen to sow a passion for starting new churches in New England. And because they sowed, we exist today. And some of you, how many of you started coming to Christ Church in 2017 or 2018? How many of you by show of hands? Yeah, not many. Yeah. Not many. Yeah, good. Listen, look around. This is like one of the most that's ever been here on a Sunday, right? Because they sowed something 4 years ago. You guys too. Did you raise your hands? All right. Yeah, originals right back there. Because they were sowing. There were Sundays, I remember the first Sunday we ever met, Mark and Annie, I can't even remember if you guys were there. Scott, I know you were there. It was 0 degrees when the church service started, with a wind chill of minus 27. And there were like 15 of us there the very first day. And we were like, God, what are we doing? Have we lost our minds starting a church in 0 degree weather? And it was just comical. And we were sowing. And you're here today, I believe. And we're reaping. And in 5 years, we'll do this again. We'll talk about this again. And we'll be reaping because you guys are sowing. This is how it works. This is the law of the harvest. Somebody might say, but man, that's risky to do that. You don't know. It's crazy right now. Listen, generosity is in direct conflict with self-preservation. Let's own that, Christians. Generosity is in direct conflict with self-preservation, but so is faith. In Luke 9, Jesus says, if anyone would follow me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and come after me. And then he says a crazy phrase, for whoever wants to follow me will lose his life. It is in losing your life that you find it. If you think generosity is anti-self-preservation and you're a Christian, listen, the whole thing of following Jesus is against self-preservation. We gave up our rights to our lives when we accepted the invitation to come and be sons and daughters of God. But look at the promise. Don't grow weary of doing good, for in due season we will reap if we don't go up. And the third thing that happens, look at what happens to everybody else. What it does for everyone else when we begin to live generously. So as we have the opportunity, let's do good to everyone, and especially those who are of the household of faith. Think about when we give, when you give, what it does for our church, what it does for our community, what it does for the whole world, and what it does for the kingdom of God. We have given away thousands of dollars into this community this year to help organizations. If a community organization calls us and says, would your church sponsor blank? I mean, we almost never say no unless we're at the end of what we budgeted for the year, and usually we even go past that. And we have people who say, your church is here for good. I truly believe if Christ Church Charlestown closed tomorrow, there are people in this community who do not believe Jesus who would grieve the loss of this body. And they would notice. Because we have sowed serving, we have sowed giving in the community. There are churches being planted. There was a church planter here this weekend, and he goes, why doesn't your church have da-da-da-da-da in your building? I looked at him and I go, because we're giving you money every month. We'll get that. You want to stop getting checks? And he was like, you don't need that. The Lord bless you. Keep going, brother. I was like, man, that's good, right? Like, we get to invest in church planters in Boston. We get to invest in church planting across North America, and we are invested in church planting around the globe. Every dollar you give, a significant portion of it goes to missions and church planting. Of course, some of it does admin. Of course, some of it does personnel. Of course, some of it is going to heat this building this winter. But a significant portion is going to love this community, to love one another, to love the rest of the world and missions and church planting, and to be about kingdom initiatives. If you lose your job tomorrow, you don't know where you're going to get grocery money, you come let us know. When you are sowing, you may one day find yourself on the reaping end because others are sowing, or even because you have chosen to sow. In the coming weeks, you're going to hear our 2023 church budget, and you're going to hear some stuff that you go, it's really boring. But you're also going to hear some stuff that's incredible. You're going to hear about people who got to hear the good news of Jesus for the first time ever this year. You're going to hear about a church in Gloucester, Massachusetts, that is baptizing people like crazy and getting to share the gospel in their community. You're going to hear about a nonprofit coffee shop in Everett that we get to come alongside and a church meets out of it. You're going to hear all of those stories in due season. It may not be immediate. My friend Neil and his wife Joy are here today. Some of you met Neil this summer. Neil gets to spend some time with some pastors and leaders in a country in the Middle East, and there was a church in South Carolina that was investing in this brother who was looking to see kingdom stuff happen in his country. And they, in the first year, at the end of giving, they went to him and said, "How many churches did you plant this year?" And the guy said, "Well, 0, but trust the process." And the next year, they went and said, "Well, we invested this money in you this year. How many churches did you plant this year?" And the guy said, "Well, 0, but trust the process." Third year, same thing. Fourth year, same thing. No churches really planted. And they came, the pastors in America, in South Carolina, came to Neil and said, hey, dude, we're giving them a lot of money to start churches. What's going on? And Neil looked at him and said, trust the process, Galatians 6. And then next year, during COVID, the guy planted 90 churches and brought 480-something churches together to think about sharing the gospel throughout their country. Don't grow weary. Don't grow weary. In due season, we will reap. I want to call you today to giving, to sowing. That is 4 things. We've put the slide up already. I want to call you to sowing that is regular. I want to call you to sowing when you get paid. I want to call you to giving. If you're a first-timer here and you go, here it is, talking about money, I promise you, I haven't talked about money in the last month. There's not been a giving. I venture to say, I know we've only ever had one giving series. It was 4 Sundays in a row, and we don't do it because it makes me as uncomfortable as it's making you. So we just don't do it. But today we will, because I deeply believe there is a nerve that connects my heart of love for Jesus to my wallet of love for things. And I need to sever that nerve as I follow Jesus. So I want to call you Christians to giving regularly, to sowing regularly. When you get paid, if you get paid once a month, I want to see you give once a month. If you get paid twice a month, I want to see you give twice a month. If you get paid weekly, I want to challenge you to begin to give weekly. You may even want to set an alarm in your phone to remind you to do it. Or you may even set up auto draft. If you get paid the same thing every month or every 2 weeks, you might just go onto the church website and set it up to begin to give. I want you to give with regularity. I want to encourage you to give joyfully, not to get rich, but because you are already rich. God loves you and provides for you and allows you to keep the overwhelming majority of what he blesses you with, and he loves a cheerful giver. I want to encourage you to give joyfully. And that is going to be a discipline, because how many of us are cheap and like to hang on to our money for rainy days? Yes, thank you, amen, hallelujah. I see that hand, I get it, I feel it. Give joyfully. Third, I want to encourage you to give generously. This is where it's about to get really specific. Christian, I want to encourage you to begin to give a percentage. This is going to mean that you are going to have to go do some math. If you're not good at math, we have nerds here who will be glad to help you do math. One of them just raised her hand. We will help you do math. I was an English major. I can't do any math. So I get it, but we want to challenge you to begin to percentage give. The Bible talks about a tithe. I'm not asking you to give a tithe today. A tithe is 10%. I am not asking you to do it. Do not walk out of here and say, JD preached about tithing today. I didn't, I haven't, and I'm not going to. But I am going to ask you to begin to give a percentage. A tithe, 10%, would be such a leap for us that we would never get there as a church. But there's a number I'm going to give you in a minute, and I'm going to ask that we all go up to that percentage. And then I'm going to ask you to give sacrificially, giving to God's work via the church. And you should give via the church. That is my biblical conviction based on chapter 6, verse 10, where he says, especially those of the household of faith. I'm going to encourage you to begin to give sacrificially. For almost every one of us in the room, 2% is going to be a sacrifice. Some of you, that means that you're not going to be able to buy your lattes. I get it. Some of us, that means we may have to take one less road trip. But I'm going to challenge you to give sacrificially. Now, somebody, let me just deal with a couple of objections that I would be feeling if I were sitting where you are. Is he preaching the prosperity gospel? The prosperity gospel says, if you sow to a church or ministry, then you will reap. God will bless you. In the prosperity gospel, God blesses me so I can be rich. So I give so I can be rich. No. Gospel giving is I sow, God allows me to reap so that I can continue to sow. And I'm about the kingdom and not my comfort. Some of you might say, shouldn't we let the poor off the hook and not ask people who make less than whatever your amount is? Shouldn't we let them off the hook? No. Giving is a privilege for Christians, regardless of what we make. If your children get $100 for their birthday, I want to encourage you to the same percentage for them. It's a privilege, and this is obedience. And it gives dignity. It robs Christians of dignity if we say, oh, because you didn't make a certain amount, you don't have to do. Listen, That's the way government works. That's not the way the kingdom of Jesus works. Everyone has dignity, and everyone is called to faith and obedience. Somebody might say, but you don't know my burden. You don't know the boulder I'm carrying financially. You're right, I don't. Tell us. Let us help you. That's the church being the church. If you're under tremendous weight, maybe we need to help get you financial coaching. Maybe we just need to help step in for a season and help you pay a couple of bills. We're happy to do that, Christian. Let us know what burdens you're carrying, whether they're caused by life or just self-inflicted financial harm. We will help you bear your burden, but we also need you to carry your load. And maybe you would say, I make so much more. It's not really fair. I make so much less. It's not really going to be helpful. Listen, this is scriptural, and this is about grace and obedience. It's between you and God, not about what your brother or sister sitting across the sanctuary is doing. Just between you and Jesus. That's all it literally is. It's not about a church's ledger sheet. This is kingdom stuff that we're talking here. Somebody might say, well, I will have to adjust my spending. Adjust it. I'm going to ask you to adjust it. If you're a Christian, I'm going to ask you to adjust your spending. Sell some stuff if you're overextended. Align with God's plan for your life. Jeremiah Clary sowed the seed. He reaped the harvest. He risked in sowing. Even at great risk, he could sit on his porch and look at his crop and delight in reaping. What could Christ Church Charlestown and the kingdom of Jesus, the Church of Boston, and you personally reap if we begin to sow in the way that God calls us to? So I'm going to ask you a question. I'm going to give you a point of application. Here's the one question. Am I currently carrying my personal load with regard to giving in this church? Not a boulder, a backpack. Are you personally carrying your financial load with regard to giving in this church? You say, I don't really know how to give. There's 2 baskets back there and envelopes. You can throw money in there. That would be amazing. We love when that happens. You can give online. You can text to give. Are you currently carrying, let's get all the boundaries and all the hurdles that are out of the way. If this is your church and you are a Christian, are you currently carrying your personal load with regard to giving in this church? And hope if you'll put the application slide up. If Christ Church Charlestown is your church, I want to challenge you, and here's the number, not 10%. I want to challenge us all to begin to give 2% more up to a tithe. If you're currently giving $20 a month, I want you to figure out what 2% of your income is and subtract $20 from it, and I want you to begin to give that amount. If you're currently giving $0, I want to challenge you, in light of Scripture, to begin to give 2%. If you're currently giving 3% once you figure it out, I want to challenge you to give 2% more. If you're giving 10% currently to what God is doing in this neighborhood and in the world through this church, you can pray about giving 2% more, but that's what we're aiming at. That's what we're aiming at. And we won't all get to 10%, but what will happen is we would hear 10% and we would all just go, I can't get there, dude. And we would never try. So does 2% seem unreasonable? Could we pray about moving things around and beginning to give 2% more? And here's the amount of time I want to put on it. I want to challenge us to do it for the next 14 months. For at least the next 14 months, anybody who calls Christ Church your church, I'm going to strongly encourage you that we would give 2% more a month for the next 14 months. If you say, do this at my church, I go to Hillsong, I go to Renewal, I go to Aletheia, great. You go ask your pastor if he wants you to give 2% more. I guarantee you he will say yes. If you go, I'm not a Christian, I hear you. Today is the day to not profess Jesus, right? But if you profess Jesus and this is your church, this is what I'm calling you to. If you're not a Christian today, here's what I would call you to: a serious conversation about what it would take for you to cross over from unbelief to belief and from not following Christ to following Christ. I've read the stats on how few people give to what God's doing in the world, and I deeply believe that, one, for our church, if we can all begin to give 2% more, it will be a game changer for the destiny of our church and our community and what God's doing in New England. And I deeply believe that even if just the Christians just in America would begin to do 2% more, we would get the great commission of sharing the gospel with all people all around the world completed so much faster for the glory of Jesus. Let me pray for us.